All right, so today we have my good friend, Christopher Nguyen, and my co-organizer for the K-First World Conference, which you can find at kfirst.world. And Christopher is CEO and co-founder of Aitomatic, and their tagline is the Industrial AI Virtual Advisor. Welcome back to the Data Exchange Podcast, Christopher.
Hey, Ben, you're the conference chair, so I'm going to address you as chairman.
Okay.
As you can see on Facebook, right? You're supposed to address me as Your Excellency.
Okay. All right. So today we're having a fun exercise here, where we're going to go through a list of observations, 12 observations about generative AI that I've put together, and that I will run by Christopher in real time here. All right. So since we have 12 things to go over, I'll start right away. So first observation.
Feel anything in advance? There's no, right? The audience is like, okay, I'm not in on this trick.
Yes. Yeah. So this is almost like a live conversation. All right. So first observation. In the case of generative AI, since people have been able to use some of the early models, there seems to be the feeling for many people that they can immediately identify use cases. So I call this use cases galore. So the reason I'm highlighting this, of course, if you go back to two years ago, one of the most hyped technology was Web3 and blockchain, and that's the opposite of this.
I think I understand where you're going with it. Yep.
It seems like here's a piece of technology that's accessible, and people have been excited enough to say that, hey, I can use this. So, Christopher, what's your reaction?
Well, didn't Paul Graham just the day or so ago say that, AI or generative AI in particular is the exact opposite of a solution in search of a problem? Is that related to what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Is this something you're also kind of getting the same reaction from industrial AI people?
I absolutely agree. Okay, I absolutely agree. So I'll sort of share the data points and then sort of go back to my theory as to why that is true, right? As you know, we've been doing.
What would you like me to call you?
No. Your Excellency, maybe. Hold on. Let me turn that off. Okay. The data point is that, as you know, we've been working on what's now called generative AI for a very long time, right? When I was in charge of, a lot of global industrial AI at Panasonic, we identified the challenge as, or the hurdle that we wanted to overcome was to be able to encode domain expertise, right? And of course, we've been doing that in computer science for many, many years, expert systems. So whenever I say that, people say, well, is that what you're doing? I say, no. There's this new thing, right? that's going to come out from my friends at Google Brain, and we're working with it. But in any case, the challenge for us was to take knowledge, not data, right? In fact, the conference you are chairing is Knowledge First Symposium, about how to encode knowledge. And you realize, oh, okay, well, just now you can just talk to the machine. So the avalanche happened when the world suddenly realized that what I'm not saying I'm the key, but the thing that I was saying suddenly gets a lot of traction February of this year, right? As you know, I travel a lot to meet with customers and so on in Japan, in Singapore, Malaysia, in Germany and so on. The reception of what I was saying, there's a step change. And if you talk to other CEOs and so on, they will feel the same thing. So there's something on the market side that says, okay, I'm very interested now. Do that for me, right? So that is sort of a sign, a signal of, oh, this is not a problem in search of a solution. Sorry, not a solution in search of a problem is the exact opposite of it, as Paul Graham says.
All right. So
the way I think about it, the way I think about it, and I'm going to try to be fast, is that I like to say that this is a revolution less of intelligence than of communication. The block has been, if you look across all these use cases, the block has been the ability for us to communicate with our machines. And then we have to do that through code, right? Now, for the first time, we can just say things and then they actually understand and they respond. And so that's why there's this avalanche of use cases that get unblocked. You notice in almost every single case, it is about the ease of communication. And that's the key. That's my headline.
All right. So we have to go faster because we have a long list here. All right. So observation number 2. Generative AI has expanded the number of personas involved in AI initiatives. So we've long talked about data science and AI as being team sports, but they tended to be still kind of farmed out to certain personas, right? So it seems like in this case, everyone can participate, or not everyone, but a lot of people can participate and have interest in participating in AI initiatives.
Right. I would say that's absolutely correct. If you refine it as people have always been interested, but they've been blocked from participation at any given point, right? There's sort of a flow, and then, okay, now it's really the data scientists to do the modeling, and then the data scientists literally throw it over the wall to the so-called ML engineers, and then they get operationalized, and then the domain experts sort of sit and talk to people, but they don't actually interact with these systems. I go back to exactly the same thing, which is, and by the way, we see that in our enterprise business as well, which is we are now having a lot more conversation. But certainly the R&D people are still very much involved, but the business division people, the people with the budgets, right? These are the people that give you the recurrent revenues. I mean, R&D is like nice POCs, right? These people are now in direct conversations with us, right? Because of this communication barrier that's been lowered. I think it's the same principle, right?
And yeah, and also kind of ties back to that first observation about use cases. The fact is, people are excited because they can see the value.
Well, I think use cases are orthogonal, right?
No, but they can they want to participate in many of these initiatives because they can see.
Yeah, but I think it's the communication aspect. I think that's the key, right? That now regular people can quote unquote train machines. That was never possible before.
All right. So observation number 3, teams will need custom foundation models, and obviously you guys have an initiative around this topic, right? So this open SSM. So broad applicability of these tools means that companies will probably use multiple models, right? So mixture of experts, some people call it. But generally, so the observation is while people are excited about some of these obviously headline grabbing models like ChatGPT and Bard, and people and teams might continue to use them, generally people will probably end up using multiple models.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's also true. And I think I can think of 3 major motivations for it, and they're completely orthogonal motivations. The most fundamental is, of course, the world, as the complexity of the world, of the fact that we have built a lot of, we have an intelligent organization like companies and countries and so on, is that there is specialization, right? The most efficient model for problem solving is not one gigantic godlike, omnipotent being, but the most efficient is that you got a collection of much smaller things, right, that have limited intelligence, but they're very good at the one thing, and they collaborate with other things. They form teams and teams for companies and so on. And I think that will translate directly into the world of, I'm going to use the word Gen AI as well. So I think that's number one. So it's not that people need it, but there'll be in sort of evolutionary pressure for that to happen. That's absolutely inevitable, okay, because it's more efficient to solve a given problem. The second one, it turns out, in enterprise is people are getting very nervous about over dependence, right? If you think about the use cases, there's another dimension to it, which is, so far the world has been mostly IT, right? Into the world of AI and so on. But it's now, for the first time, because of this ability for regular humans, right, domain experts, to interact with these machines, it is moving over to the much larger OT, right? The operational technology, the manufacturing, the automotive and so on. And so people are very nervous about having to depend on another vendor. This model that we think is already baked into sort of paying a Microsoft tax. I love my friends at Microsoft, and I hold Microsoft stock and everything. But I think this other group of enterprise buyers are saying, I want my own, right? These people are used to, on-prem, if you will, from our terminology, say deployment. It is a small component. It is a component of my larger manufacturing system. I don't want to have to depend on someone, not just for the ownership, but security, privacy, all of these things. And I don't mean just the deployment. I mean the actual intellectual property ownership.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
So there's many reasons why this will happen, but it will happen, right? So
Well, absolutely.
so
Third,
next observation.
I'll just mention very quickly, but I won't go over it. Just to stimulate the thought. The third reason is geopolitics. I'll just
Or I mean, even beyond that, right? So there's many reasons, even for companies. So custom models is a thing, and listeners will need to figure out a strategy around custom models. Next observation: the concept of hallucination has entered the mainstream, right? So it's not the concept of hallucination is something that the people who've been working on generative AI have been aware of, but it's very interesting that everyone is talking about hallucination, and even I think even some CXOs are talk about hallucination. So I just find that an interesting thing. So anyway,
So what do you want? What's the question?
so do you agree that is this something you're encountering, that people are concerned about hallucination?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. My commentary is this. Okay. So whatever I say next, okay, I will agree. Don't misunderstand me. That I think solving hallucination is absolutely important.
Well, I'm not saying anything about solving. I'm just saying the concept.
The concept itself,
Yeah.
right?
It has entered the mainstream.
That's what I'm saying, because I'm about to sort of deposition it a little bit, right? I think it's entered the vernacular as a bright shining thing at a level where I think it's really inappropriate, right? In other words, it's causing inappropriate in the sense of FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. On the one hand, it's sort of there's academic pressure to solve hallucination within the model, right? And you notice I said within the model, but it's not surprising at all. Like even your brain or my brain, if you hang it in the middle of the of the ceiling, and then drop it down and give me no sensors to interact with the world, it will hallucinate, right? What I'm getting at is that this sort of thing on a system basis is easily addressable. And I don't mean, okay, I'm not saying 100%, but a lot of what people are concerned about are simply solved with table lookup, with access to.
Yes. So stop there, because I'm going to the next topic.
Okay.
All right. So next observation.
There's too much attention paid to hallucination.
Okay. So next observation, retrieval-augmented generation seems to be a starting point for many teams, and in my mind, seems like a natural starting point for many teams who are looking for like a first project in this space, right? So retrieval-augmented generation, this is the process where you enhance a large language model by incorporating an external data source. It could be a knowledge graph. In most cases, it's a system that can do vector search. So they call these systems vector databases. So not only is there an ecosystem of tools for teams to immediately use, so vector search, knowledge graphs, and even startups, it just seems like a natural first project for many teams.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so is this something that when you talk to executives, they already know what that is?
No, I think some, particularly at the technically grounded level, they are aware that it is possible to hand over a bunch of documents to us, and then suddenly, a day later or so, depending on the size and everything, be able to sort of somehow intelligently ask questions about those documents. So at that level, I think there's generally broad awareness. Whether it is RAG or fine-tuned models or something, that's one level deeper than they understand, right? So definitely, and so a lot of companies like ours, the way we do the POCs, right? At least at the what I call the Q&A level, I need to take a moment to explain this. Q&A is interesting, but not enough, right? And so it's just a demonstration to say, yeah, I have these capabilities. What people are really looking for is problem solving. And there's nothing, RAG or fine tune or anything, or even the largest of models, right? Equipped with full world knowledge, they cannot solve problems yet, right? And so it's a system that these execs are asking for. And these are nice little demonstration to build confidence and to build, general corporate knowledge and so on. But let me flip it this way. The trough of disillusionment will happen. Most likely, one of the triggers is going to be, but it doesn't solve any problems.
Right. All right. Next observation: the rise of foundation models, generative AI, and retrieval-augmented generation will require a new set of data engineering and perhaps even data management tools, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean that if you look back to in recent years, we've had kind of all this excitement about new tools around the so-called modern data stack. But most of those tools are really optimized for structured or semi-structured data. But a lot of the data that people are beginning to use and beginning to re-examine, I don't know, they could be PDFs, images. A lot of those tools that we were excited about around the modern data stack may not be sufficient to address, right? So what do I mean by that? So if you look at a typical PDF, yes, there are probably open source libraries you can use to just kind of read the PDF, do basic things. But if you really want to extract detailed information out of those PDFs, build pipelines, those tools are just beginning to be built. And I think we'll see more of those. Now, on the data management side, yes, we have vector search. We even have it at scale. But right now, a lot of the vector search tools, are not on par with equivalent tools in structured data, like the ones that we've gotten, features that we've gotten spoiled with, right? So what things like, incremental updates, streaming, real-time ingestion. A lot of these tools right now are still kind of in its infancy. They're still kind of doing kind of the basic thing that they're supposed to do, which is vector search, right? So, and a lot of what they do is batch, not real time, right? So anyway, so the observation again is that we might need a fresh look at the tools we use for data engineering and data management in light of generative AI.
Well, you've taken the 4 minutes, so what do you want to say? So actually, I think it is very profound what your observation is, right? Just the previous point has to do with the RAG. So I can sort of see how you're organizing these observations now. They do connect directly to one another. If you think about RAG and so on, again, if you think about it's a revolution of communication, right? Right. I mean, the LLM is just sitting there. We're not really going at its intelligence about who the president of US was in 1875. We're just saying, hey, provide this adaptive interface, this fault tolerant interface for me to get to my document, right? So it is about communication yet again. And then this observation of yours is yet again, the thing that we're feeding, I think you're absolutely right. Let's say the last 5 years, the ML revolution, if you will, we've been feeding ultimately into a learning algorithm, right? And so it says, oh, I need a table with so many rows and a column maybe with a label or something like that. Now we're feeding a large model, right? Maybe not necessarily a large language model. Now we're feeding a model, and you remember I said, very soon we'll be retraining machines using knowledge and not data. That's why we have knowledge first, and that's exactly what happened. In other words, the new data stack should be called the new knowledge stack.
And also, Christopher, I think to some extent people expect miracles, right? So I have a bunch of PDFs, because this LLM is so good, surely it can get everything out of the PDFs. But we need tools to help extract all of that information out of the PDFs, right?
Think about what people are really doing, whether they're consciously aware of it. They're trying to extract knowledge, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, the excitement around lake houses and the modern data platform. I mean, they're built on the assumption that you can actually build these pipelines that are easy to maintain, right? So that don't break, that are robust.
That's all data. That's all data.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's take the case of Llama Index and RAG, for example. Among many other solutions, my friends at Llama Index and Vectara and so on are doing this. But reading a PDF by indexing it is one thing. But if you can somehow get metadata out of the PDF and then feed that metadata into the RAG, algorithm, your tricks, if you will, it's considered a trick right now. But if you think about what you're really doing is you're saying, hey, the metadata is the knowledge that is somehow embedded in here that I want to make available to this front-end LLM, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not just metadata filtering, incremental updates, but even the basic thing of how do I get the most out of the PDF if the PDF is a complex thing, right?
Or ask multiple queries, right? And
then the PDF may have tables, images, and so on. All right, so I need to move on to the next topic, which is so this is an observation, non-judgmental, just an observation. There's a lot of hype around fine-tuning. And again, so for people who don't follow this, the objective of fine-tuning is to optimize a model for a particular task. So simple observation, there's a lot of hype around fine-tuning. Are you here? Do you have the same sense? Do people over ask you about fine-tuning and over expect things out of fine-tuning?
The word hype is quite prejudicial.
So there's a lot of interest around fine-tuning.
There's a lot of interest, absolutely. But it goes back to, of course, there's always hype, right?
Yeah.
But I don't want to say hype as in I dismiss the whole thing. I go back to the motivation.
Or I guess there's over expectation for what fine-tuning can deliver.
I'll tell you what people want, then you can tell me whether it's like over expectation. They want their own.
Yeah. Right? Well, but that could be like a custom model, right? So custom specialized model that they may not have arrived at using fine-tuning, right? So
I see. Okay. Well then
so fine-tuning has become kind of an umbrella term. That
I see. Okay. Well, yeah. So in that sense, I totally agree. As a singular, very specific technique to get at my ownership of my model, then maybe it's taking too much oxygen out of the room.
Yeah.
I would put fine-tuning as one of the many techniques, right? Of arriving at what enterprise really want, which is their own thing, very efficient, by the way. They don't want to have to operate, at $1 trillion, 1 trillion parameter model just to solve a pump problem, right? So they want these things. So it's quite sensible in what they want, by the way. We shouldn't treat these people as, little children, receiving the wisdom of Silicon Valley. It's really the other way around, right? So they know what they want, and then they say, well, does this technique give me that? Does this technique give me that? Okay, we'll go ahead and combine whatever techniques you have, right? By the way, that's why we're building what we're building, this IVA problem-solving system, right?
So Anyscale actually, and I'll link to this for our listeners. Anyscale has written a great post, basically really laying out this space of techniques for domain-specific model refinement, for which fine-tuning is one option. All right. So
quantization and so on to make it small. That's very important.
Yeah. Separate topic. I'll get to that. So right now I'm just talking about domain-specific model refinement. All right. So the next observation is, I think people are still kind of are still beginning to realize that, okay, so I'm not dismissing fine-tuning out of hand, but knowing when and how to use fine-tuning will require experimentation. So That's the observation, right?
That's patently true. Same with everything.
Right.
RAG techniques, if you have a front end that is a fine-tuned model and a back end that is a RAG model, how do you get an answer out of the two? I mean, there are dozens of different ways you can imagine of querying, these things. So absolutely, experimentation. Now, here's the key, though. I mean, to say that would not be very useful. Teams that are thinking about this, at least I'll tell you what my team is doing. We're trying to make it as prompt independent as possible. Not entirely independent, but in other words, if you have a technique that is so dependent on quote unquote prompt engineering, you could get in trouble very quickly, right? Because the whole thing is like a house of cards; it could fall apart. That is, you should try to find techniques that in these experiments, you should search for things that are sort of more fundamentally sound.
Yeah. All right. So next observation has to do, I guess, kind of similar to my observation about we need to reimagine data engineering and data management tools. I think we also need to reimagine the space of tools for serving and deployment. And this runs the gamut, right? So I think many of the tools that we optimize for serving and deployment did not assume large models, right? So set aside models with billions of parameters, even models with hundreds of millions of parameters. The good news, though, is that people are working on this. Anyscale, for example, is investing a lot in this topic, the people behind Ray. But as you mentioned earlier, Christopher, so there are a lot of lessons from other areas in AI and machine learning, including speech and computer vision, where those communities spent years working on things like compression, distillation, quantization, compression, and are now able to deliver really interesting models for, I don't know, doorbells or on phones offline. So the good news is that people are working on these problems, and we're still in the very early stages. But it is true that these models right now, as they exist, are expensive to deploy. I mean, the inference is expensive. It's slow, right? So the latency is low. So in fact, as a user for many of these APIs, that's one of the most annoying things is because I've been used to using small models locally that are just instantaneous, but now you're waiting seconds and seconds, right? So again, going back, the observation is we'll need to reimagine the tools around serving and deployment, but the good news is people are doing that right now.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I think the details differ from generation to generation, but the general business model, industry architecture is the same. There are specialists in these things, and as a company that is a user of these things, we're very happy, right, to say, hey, you guys do that. We'll pay you money to specialize in that because I don't want to do the R&D there. And so the only thing I would add is sort of maybe I'll use a moment to plug a company that we work with called Lepton, right? .ai. I don't know. You remember Yang Qing, right? Yang Qing's
Yeah. Cafe.
So you should do a podcast with him. He's they're the team sort of thing. Yeah, Cafe, and Google Brain, and Facebook,
and you
AI platform.
You in particular, because of industrial AI, right? So the industrial AI people might have, depending on the application, very specific and exacting requirements around latency and model size, right?
This idea of on-prem or on-device, right? Inference, and not just inferencing, but problem solving is very key. And particularly in the semiconductor industry, there's a special requirement that's pretty cute, right? More so than any other industry in semiconductor, the vendor and the user must have a Chinese wall between each other. Like TSMC does not want Applied Material to know exactly what it's using the equipment for and how it's using it. So then the question is, how do you How do you work together? Because there's a very tight relationship. So in up to now, in the recent years, that has been by compartmentalizing and say, okay, you got 5 team members here, in Hsinchu, or now, in the future, near future, it's going to be in Phoenix, and then you're supposed to forget everything when you're done, right? Like you're not supposed to go back and talk about these things. So interestingly, if we can put a virtual expert in between, right, and then the virtual expert can be sort of commercially guaranteed to sort of forget the conversation, and that's how this knowledge can flow from one company to the other. But the deployment model, coming back to what you're saying, these requirements from the industrial world can be quite strict. Safety, reliability. You drive car. That's another pet peeve of mine. So please give me 30 seconds on this. We are children. This whole conversation about AI safety and so on. I am so frustrated that nobody is going to ask the people who have been dealing with this for a century in terms of safety, reliability. So yes, of course, there are new things about this thing, but I think the bulk of it are lessons that the industry has had to iterate on. People have died without seatbelts and so on, right? And yet, all these AI priests, in our bubble, are talking to each other and not going to the 100 years or so of iterations. Regulatory, bodies and everything exist. Why don't we learn? Even try to learn what we can unlearn from those things. I think the conversation needs to take place, and I'm pretty frustrated that there's a lot of grand pronouncements about all this, with total ignorance of that entire body of knowledge. All right, done.
All right. So next observation, we're all excited about generative AI, but the reality is we are still in the very early stages of learning how to build applications used by generative AI. And actually, recently I wrote a post where I took a deep dive into a very, very specific system, real-time entity resolution. And the only reason I did that was I wanted to see, so if I take a modern entity resolution system, what are all the really demanding requirements? And when you list it out, it's quite hard to build and really really not worth your time, right? To build it, because there's so many things you have to factor in around, for example, real-time online learning, right? So sequence neutrality, scalability, and things like that. So the details of building such a system that combines accuracy, scale, big data, real-time processing, and serving become overwhelming. And I think that right now, I think it's good for us to all be excited because we can build all these simple prototypes. But when you map it to enterprise with their specific requirements and exacting regulations that they have to comply with, let's be real here. We're still in the very, very early stages.
100% agree. I think we're, again, we're not only early, but we're early in a very different sense. Like, the observation that I make, the whole thesis for Aitomatic, the company, is that we're one of the few Silicon Valley companies that actually work directly with and serve the industrial world. And you as an investor, I think of me as an investor, you ask the question, why now? It's just like you could have done that 10 years ago, 20 years ago. For the first time, this technology can be directly applied in an efficient way, right? In the past, let's take one generation, just machine learning, right? There's not been enough data in the physical world, right? It turns out at Google and Facebook, we've been picking the low-hanging fruits. That's the easy stuff because there's so much data, so we can just apply machine learning. The Gmails, which I used to help run, one of the first applications of machine learning at scale to do spam filtering, because there's so much data. For the first time, the moment is now that we can actually apply generative AI because they understand domain expertise. And that's what's been blocking the industrial revolution 4.0, if you will, right? And so that's the exciting moment.
But they,
And so
map all of this and kind of fast forward to the future. You can imagine a system that has to not break, be able to ingest information in real time, be secure. If you start the kind of mapping all of these requirements, you realize, okay, so we have these simple prototypes where we can build kind
right.
of simple chains of prompts, but we're far from real world applications.
And that's what I'm trying to get to, which is the people like me that are sort of bringing this technology to this world need to realize that we are now learning for the first time. Now, I have the advantage of having learned it since 2016, as part of Panasonic. But the point is, as an ecosystem, we're just learning it for the first time. So you're absolutely right. It's early in multiple senses, certainly early in technology in general, but the fact that we can apply it elsewhere, if you will, that's also very early, and we better learn that world, right? Don't think we're bringing fire from the gods to the industrial world. They've been, they're much older and much more established. We got to learn how to navigate those things. I don't mean just industry, but exactly the things that you say, right? Trust, safety, reliability, and so on. They eat that stuff for breakfast. We're just learning this stuff as computer science people.
Or even, things that we take for granted in other things that we've done in the past, like real time, right? So,
Yeah.
Those are going to be kind of table stakes in many settings and applications. All right. So speaking of trust,
right. So related to that, real engineering will become important again. I would argue most of what's been happening in software in Silicon Valley the last 10 years, much of it has not been engineering. Okay, done. Next.
Yeah. That's why actually it was interesting for me when I took a very, very, like I said, a very specific system, entity resolution, unpack what are all the requirements I would need to actually have a modern system that I can rely on. It's a lot, so all these impulses that we have of let's just scratch this itch and build this in-house. Yes, you can come up with something that works, over a weekend maybe, but it's not something that you can deploy to an enterprise. Let's put it that way, right? So
exactly. The skills to estimate, quantification, quantify will become important again, right? Because these are exacting requirements. You can't just eyeball it.
All right. So the next observation is I think that there's not enough AI teams that are systematically documenting the steps they're taking to manage risks. And again, for me, I actually wrote a recent post where I consulted my friends from Luminous.law, the first law firm focused on AI.
Oh, those guys.
And I compiled a bunch of resources, but one of the resources was the FTC's letter to OpenAI. And I took that letter, I turned the 16 to 17 pages of questions the FTC is asking OpenAI into a mind map. And when you look at this mind map, you go, okay, so I should just do this proactively up front. Because when someone asks me, I have it in hand. I don't think enough teams are being proactive and just documenting many of the things that the FTC laid out in this letter.
Yep. At Panasonic, there's a whole organization called the Product Security Organization. Now, the translation is a little bit awkward, but it is built into the engineering culture at companies that have dealt with this for a very long time. I go back again, you're absolutely right. And OpenAI is a great company. It just doesn't come from that culture, right? And this is a sort of
I'm not necessarily kind of criticizing them. I'm just saying that actually this letter is an opportunity for the rest of us to look at this letter and say, okay, so we should be doing some of these, right? So
what is new is that for the first time, right? And people may argue there's a little gray area, but allow me some poetic license. For the first time, we are playing with fire, right? Like Gmail, 1 billion users. I used it, again, what's the worst incident was when someone lost their entire PhD thesis. I feel very bad about that. But people are rightly concerned about what this newly arrived technology can do. And as an industry, we haven't dealt with that before, but other people have, with their own technologies, with their own requirements. And what you say, for example, this whole process, right? Documentation, audit trailing, right? And so on. Let's create this, but let's also learn the lessons that have been learned by other people as well. Is my
Yeah,
point.
I mean, I'm just saying that I think there's value in kind of along the way noting what you've been doing in terms of managing risks. And actually, this letter from the FTC is a great roadmap for, okay, so these are kinds. If I can just answer some of these questions,
Yeah.
I'll have a better idea of myself of what the system is about, right?
That's all the intuitions around model provenance and explainability and so on, right? So when you enumerate these
No,
things,
it's actually a lot more than that.
no, I'm saying as
Yeah,
an
yeah,
example,
yeah,
as an example.
yeah.
What I mean is that's exactly what I'm getting to, which is as you list these things, they become 1,000 things.
No, they're not. They
Yeah.
don't have to be. Yeah,
What I tell people is
yeah, yeah.
it's not about the possibilities, but it's the priorities. How do
There's actually another resource here that I point teams to, which is the NIST, National Institutes of Science and Technologies, have a risk management framework for AI. It's
yeah,
manageable.
I
So
think
do
I think
so, the observation is not enough teams are doing
I would say
basic.
this. I would say this. Maybe here's a point of disagreement.
Yeah.
How do you know that is sufficient?
No, I'm not saying it's sufficient. This is basic documentation. So not enough teams are doing basic
You're holding that
documentation.
up as the standard, right? And it's NIST, so it is the standard. All I'm saying is let's review other people's experiences. That's lacking, right?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
NIST is the closest to
I'm okay with that. Just have a basic playbook for basic documentation. I think basically if you talk to my friends at Luminous.law, who by the way are the go-to law firm for chief legal counsels at top companies, including top tech companies, that's basically the basic advice. Do some documentation.
we should talk to them and say, they're probably the best place to say, okay, we can incorporate knowledge from other, fields as well, right? And not try to figure out, from
Yeah,
first.
it's not, they're not saying you have to do something comprehensive at all at this point. Do something is what they're saying. Right. So whether it's not,
I,
whether it's the
I,
NIST,
I agree. I think we're talking about two orthogonal points. I totally agree. We should do
yeah,
something.
yeah.
I also,
Do some documentation, and the NIST framework is a good starting point. If you want to do more, do more.
no,
Right.
I'm not even saying more.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should definitely do something, but we shouldn't bumble around doing it only.
No, you don't have to now because there's enough resources
What
that
if I claim that is bumbling? Never mind.
yeah. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So then the final observation is the following. All of these things can be simultaneously true. Generative AI will redefine, possibly eliminate some jobs, but also open up new opportunities for people.
Of course, that is patently true, right? And I don't mean to be flippant about it, right? But that's true of, in fact, that's the least surprising result, right? That's true of any technology in the past. There are no, sort of horse riding or whatever that is called is no longer a major profession. But then there are drivers and so on.
I guess the motivation behind this observation, Christopher, is there might be one camp that downplays too much. No, there won't be any job disruptions or job dislocation. And then there's another camp that might be, oh yeah, but there's only going to be positive things about this. People will be doing all sorts of new interesting things, right? So I think it's basically a mixture of all these things, right? So
I think it's probably easy to just pick one point of view or one quote and sort of criticize it. But I think probably my sense of it is most resonant with Kai-Fu Lee's, right? who says exactly, the observation that you said, which is there'll be a lot of displacement. And he
Yeah,
goes even
we cannot downplay that, right?
exactly. And in fact, he would go even one higher order of resolution, which is more white collar displacement percentage wise than blue collar. The reason for that, right? And then again, that is also the physical digital divide that I see all the time, right? There's a recurrent theme here. But there will be also things that will be created, right? That leverage and it just won't happen by accident. It has to be consciously designed, if you will. Like it has to be done by intent, right? And I'm one of those people, and I don't think this is talked about enough. Just because the net result, the steady state is going to be good, doesn't mean that the transition is going to be painless. I think we have to recognize that. And the higher the speed of the transition, the more painful it's going to be. Change is painful, right? And so there needs to be thought given to how we manage change.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I can already see it impact how I work, right? So, but it actually makes me more excited because basically I feel like I can do more things. But I don't want to be I want to be cognizant of the fact that some people are also kind of afraid of how it might impact their work, right? So
Did you see that Ipsos survey that came out that showed lower income countries, lower per capita, are more excited or more optimistic about AI than higher GDP per capita countries?
I guess it depends on what you do, right?
Right, but it's the opposite, generally speaking, of other technologies. So that's food for thought, right?
Yeah. And with that, thank you, Christopher, for helping me think through some of my 12 observations about generative AI. And for those of you who want to meet Christopher in person, go to kfirst.world and there will be more details about the symposium there.
Love it. Love your 12 observations.